Hey everyone, we're in my kitchen today because today I'm going to teach you how to make homemade salsa. So, the tools you're going to need for this recipe are a cutting board, a bowl, a knife, make sure you have a parent or someone with you, and a spatula or a spoon or something to mix all the ingredients together. The ingredients you're going to need: tomatoes. I'm using Roma tomatoes or small beefsteak tomatoes, but you can use any kind of tomato you want. A small white onion, some limes, a bunch of cilantro, which I grew in my garden. And I'm going to use, you can just use regular salt. I'm going to use garlic salt because I like the little bit of garlic taste. And that's it. So the first thing we're going to do, anytime you cook, start by washing your hands. Especially if you're making food for someone else. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to start with my tomatoes. I'm actually going to rinse those off as well. I got them at the grocery store. Make sure they don't have any stickers on them. Give them a quick little rinse. All right. Now, if you don't have a really sharp knife like this, then you're going to need to get a serrated knife for your tomatoes, because if you use just a regular kind of more dull knife, it's going to smush the tomatoes. This knife is really sharp, and so it will cut through tomatoes. But if you don't have a super sharp knife, you can use a steak knife or a tomato knife, which has a serrated edge, which means it has those bumpy edges like that. So you can use that kind of knife if you have it as well. But this knife is able to cut through. So I'm going to start by cutting the top of my tomato off where it was attached to the stem, because I don't want that part's too thick. And then I'm just going to dice it into small sort of cubes. I cut it in half, and then in quarters, then in eighths, and then sort of cut it into little pieces of tomato. You don't want them super, super small, but you also don't want huge pieces that people can't fit into their mouth. Make sure you're being very careful if you're using a sharp knife. I try to keep my fingers away. But you can also curl your fingers in like this, and it protects them a little bit better. Same thing. Keep chopping. I'm using 3 tomatoes. Actually, I think I'm only going to use 2 tomatoes because I'm looking at the amount of tomato I already have, and I'm thinking 2 is going to be enough. That's the best part about cooking. You can sort of change it as you go. I don't think I'd be able to finish 3 tomatoes worth of salsa. So I'm going to make just 2. Cut the top off. Cut it in half. Quarters. Eighths. And into bite-sized chunks. Later in the summer, I'll be able to make this recipe with the tomatoes that I grew in my garden, but I don't have any that are ripe right now. All right, I'm gonna put that last tomato off to the side. I'm gonna take my tomatoes and I'm gonna put them all into my bowl. Now I'm going to move on to my onion. And if you're like me, onions tend to make your eyes water, so hopefully that doesn't happen in this video, but it might. So just bear with me. All right, when I chop an onion, I chop the top and the bottom. So where the root was and where the top of the onion is off first. Put that to the side, flip it around. And then I take the outermost layer off because that's the skin part, the flaky skin part. You don't want to eat that part. And then I do the same thing that I did with my tomato. I just cut it in half, cut it in quarters, cut it in eighths, and then actually I'm going to keep that whole half together, hold it on one side, and try to chop the onion this way. I'm going to put that in my bowl and see how much onion I have, and then make a decision about whether I want to cut the other half of the onion. I think that onion to tomato ratio looks pretty good, so I'm going to save the other half of my onion and use it for something else. That to the side. Okay. Now I'm going to do the cilantro. So you're going to want to take the really long stems. You just want the leaves, really. So there's a couple ways you can do that. If they're small leaves like that, you can just pinch them off. Or if you have a big stem, what you can do is hold it by the top and pull down, and the leaves will come off. Cilantro is really easy to grow in your garden. So if you have a place to plant cilantro, I highly recommend it. I really like cilantro. I know a lot of people don't like cilantro. A lot of people, it's like a genetic thing. They think it tastes like soap. I am not one of those people. I really like cilantro, so I tend to put a lot of cilantro into my salsa, but also just in general in my food. I like things that have a lot of seasoning. Other things that are pretty hardy and easy to grow in your garden, in terms of herbs and spices, rosemary is pretty easy to grow. Chives are pretty easy to grow. And basil is pretty easy to grow. So I have all of those going. I also have a dill plant, but this is the first time I'm growing dill, so I don't actually know if it grows really well. We'll see. All right, we're getting close. So I would say I'm going to use probably about a half a cup of not unchopped cilantro. But again, totally, like, if you hate cilantro, leave it out. Put in some chives, put in some whatever you want. Put in some parsley, don't put in any of it. It's totally up to you. A lot of recipes call for spicy peppers, like a poblano or serrano or a jalapeno. If you like spicy and you happen to have one of those, go for it. I don't have one of those with me, so I rinsed the cilantro when I brought it in from my garden. So make sure that if you get it from the store, that you rinse it before you chop it and put it into your salsa. So I just sort of try to bunch it really close together. And the key to chopping spices is that you want to chop them as little as possible, because a lot of their flavor comes from the sort of juices that are inside of them. And so if you're sort of hacking away at spices, you're going to leave a lot of that flavor on your knife and on your cutting board, and you don't want to do that. So I just sort of try to hold it together and very sort of slowly chop through my cilantro. Because I really like the taste of cilantro, I don't need the pieces to be really small. So I'm going to leave the pieces of cilantro pretty big. So that looks good to me. Just like little pieces of cilantro. Put that in. Last of the big ingredients, lime. So we're gonna juice a lime. We're gonna start with one lime. I have two in case I decide that I wanna have two. So the first thing I do when I'm juicing a lime is cut it in half. There's a lot of different ways to juice limes and lemons and things like that. Some people have a juicer. They put it in, they sort of do this. I've seen people stick a fork into it and then squeeze around the fork. I generally just use my hands. And what I do, make sure you don't have any open cuts because that may sting. But I'll hold my left hand over the bowl and then squeeze one half of my right hand. And the reason why I do that is because I want to catch any seeds that may come out of the lime rind. So the juice will fall through my hand and go into the bowl, but any like big pieces of pulp or any seeds will stay in my hand. So I'm kind of filtering it with my hand. So we're going to start with that. This doesn't seem to have any seeds. So I've checked no seeds, so now I'm going to use both hands. It's a good arm workout. I'm going to do the other side. There are no seeds in this lime. Nice. No seeds. All right. Got that lime juiced. Rinse my hands off. I'm going to use my spatula. Mix all the ingredients together before I put my salt on. Smells like cilantro and lime, which is one of my all-time favorite combinations. Awesome. So I'm going to take my garlic salt, and again, you can just use regular salt, but I like the little bit of spiciness that comes with garlic salt. And I'm just going to eyeball it. It probably is going to come out to be about a teaspoon, but again, I'm going to taste it, and if it feels like it needs more salt, I can always add more salt. If you dump in a whole bunch of salt and then it's too salty, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So I'm going to start with that. Mix it all in together. Here comes the best part. I want to break up any big chunks of, I'm noticing some of my onions stayed together in big chunks, so I'm going to go back with my fingers and just make sure they don't all stick together. That would be a very oniony bite. Okay, time for the taste test. I'm going to go grab a spoon. And I want to get a little bit of everything. So a piece of tomato, a piece of onions, some cilantro, the salt and lime juice is on there. It's pretty good. I actually think it could use a little bit more lime. So I'm going to cut my other lime in half. And juice just one half. This salsa, the best part about it is that it's so fresh. You know, a lot of times salsa that you get at the store, it tastes good, but it doesn't taste fresh from the garden. Even if you're not using ingredients from your garden, if you're using ingredients from the store, it still tastes so fresh. All right, one more taste test. Let's see. Trying to get the perfect bite. Perfect. I can save this other half of this lime. I can put it in a plastic container and put it in the fridge, and I can use it later for something else. And that's how you make homemade salsa. Enjoy!